Hello and welcome to ATI 4448. In this session we are going to address the project life cycle. We will look at the different information provided or included in the life cycle. In addition, we'll start with the definition of project management. To go over the life cycle or the project life cycle and manage it, we need to understand the definition of project management, and we have two definitions here that I got from two different sources. The first source is the project management book, the guide, 4th edition, that's been used for project management professional certification. And the other source is the textbook, which is the book that we use in the course, or it's not a must or mandatory, but that I assigned for this course by Robert Wysocki. The first definition states that project management is a method and set of techniques based on accepted principles of management used for planning, estimating, and controlling work activities to reach a desired result on time, within budget, and according to specifications. While Robert Wysocki says that project management is organized common sense supported by the tools, templates, and processes to guarantee satisfaction or satisfying client requirements and delivering business value. Now, in general, you have certain processes or activities that you need to manage using all kind of tools, techniques, templates, anything that you can, resources, to achieve the a certain goal or certain objectives that's mandatory or required by a client or a customer, and that's our project. So whether we go with the definition of the project management or the Robert Wysocki, both of them are stating that we need to manage these processes, we need to work on these activities and make sure that we are satisfying our customer according to the budget, the time, and the specifications. Most of these projects are being driven or being supervised or overseen by either project manager or functional manager. Either the functional manager has the full control on the project, or the project manager has authority and full control on the project. Most of the time, the functional manager has more capabilities or more control on different projects than the project managers. That depends on the structure of the company. Some organizations are structured in a functional way or a matrix. If that's the case, then the functional manager is the one who takes over, and the project manager will have limited authority, maybe even no authority whatsoever. While in some strong matrix or what they call it, projectized, they call it this name. Maybe it's not a real name, but it's being used in project management. That's called, as if it's project-oriented organization, projectized organization. In this case, the project manager will have full authority, and he should be actually available full-time to control the project. Whether we are talking about the project manager or functional manager, each one of them has their own objectives that they need to accomplish. So for the project manager, since they are overseeing the project, they would like to complete that project within time, within budget, and within customer specifications, while the functional manager, who's responsible for the different resources and the staff would like to develop staff skills. Most of the time you have new hires, so you would like to assign them to different projects to learn from these projects, either to learn from experienced people or to learn from hands-on experience by implementation and application of a certain project. So the functional manager always would like to develop the staff skills to meet project requirements and to use it in different projects. Since this is the case, you will see a conflict. For me as a project manager, I would like to have the most skillful professional people that work with me in the project to be able to accomplish it in time, within budget, and to have a very high quality product or service. While for the functional manager, he doesn't care if he assigns a newly coming staff to learn on the project, which might affect the quality of the product or the end service. So it depends on what we need. Project managers need something, functional manager need another thing, and there will be always a conflict between both, unless the functional manager is the one responsible for the project. And in small companies, you will see that the project manager is the same as the functional manager if they are small. In other companies, they call the functional manager resource manager, so they have different even people: functional, resource manager, project manager. All these conflicts will be more, let's say, realistic, or will appear more if the company is larger and larger. The larger the company, the more conflict you will see between project manager and functional manager. The definition of project life cycle, that it's a collection of generally sequential and sometimes overlapping phases, which are identified by the management and by the organization. And this definition based on the project management institution. The life cycle provides the basic framework for managing the project, regardless of the specific work involved. And every project has a definite start and definite finish. If we look at the graph here, which is a graph that I got from the project management book guide, the 4th edition, you will see that at the beginning the cost and staffing levels will be very low and start climbing up to be the maximum during the execution or carrying out the work, and then it will start dropping fast as time approaches for project close out. At the same point, if you look at the risk and uncertainty at the beginning of the project, I don't have enough information, I did not begin the execution, I don't know what's going to happen, so I have lots of uncertainty, lots of risk. This uncertainty and risk will start decreasing as the project approaches closeout. If any change were to be performed at the beginning of the project, if the customer asks me to do some change, that will be easy to be done at the beginning of the project, while it will get harder and harder to do that change as I approach project completion. For example, if we are building a house, at the beginning of the construction, we can say that can you just ignore one of the dry walls and let's make it a big open area, and then maybe the construction company will ignore one of the dry walls and not put any dry walls or a foundation or insulation or anything, while at the end towards the end of the project they have to knock down that wall, and the waste of paint, labor, and other associated costs will be demolished with that wall. That's a big change. That's a big cost that will be associated with this small change of knocking drywall. So you see how the cost associated with a change will increase as a project approaches completion. For large and complex projects, it may require additional level of control. So what you do at that point, you break it down into sub activities or sub projects, so you can control it, or you can add another level of control on these sub projects. The structure for the project life cycle is composed of 4 processes: initiation of the project, planning for the project, the execution itself, and the closure. The project life cycle is associated with monitoring and controlling process that spreads across all 4 processes, as you can see in this figure here, which also been taken from the project management book guide, the 4th edition for the project management institution, or from the project management institution. Project phases are complete sequentially, but can overlap in some project situations. So when a phase ends, the work transfers to the next phase. The phase end can be reassessed to apply changes or terminate that project if needed. These points can be referred to as phase exits or milestones. It can be named phase gates, decision gates, stage gates, or kill points. Excuse me. The primary deliverable or objective of the phase requires an extra control to be successfully achieved. And when we say a phase, this figure here represents one phase. So for one phase, a project with one phase, you can see that we have initiation process, which leads to planning, execution, and closing the process. During the execution, if I need any change, I have to replan and then execute again. And the monitoring and controlling process, like we said, it overlaps all or spreads across all 4 processes. The outcome from this project or this phase can be an input for another phase, and so on. For example, again, we'll go back to the construction example. If I would like to build a house in an area where there are some bushes, then I have to clear the bushes first. So I will bring a company that's specialized in clearing the land and taking the bushes down. That's a project. Now the outcome of that is a clear land that can be used for constructing a house. So now the second phase will be to construct the house, and so on. So those are the type of phases that we are talking about: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and you can see that in each phase actually we have to initiate, plan, execute, and close, and lead to some deliverables or objectives at the end of each project. Some organizations have established policies that standardize all projects, while other companies allow the project management team to choose the proper methodology to manage a project. In the initiation process, and we are going to go through all of them, but we'll go each one will be in a separate chapter. So we're going to start with the initiation, and the initiation process is the process that the organization will leverage historical information such as past project selection decisions and past project performance when authorizing a project or the next project phase. So during that, we look at the historical data, we'll analyze it, and use the information that we had and the experience to maybe estimate the time, the cost, and other needed information for this project. So the project initiation is the first project management process, which is the first one in the project life cycle, and many project managers have minimal real life experience with these activities, because most of the time it's being done by the upper management and then introduced to a project manager to start the execution or the planning. Again, like I said, some organizations depends on the functional manager to be in control and in authority more than the project manager, and in these organizations the project manager will not have enough experience in these kind of activities for the initiation and starting the project. Some organizations during the initiation use expert judgment as a primary tool or technique for project initiation. What do we need the expert judgment for? It's used to assess the product description. What kind of product or service I would provide at the end of the project for the customer. What are the characteristics of that product, so I can deliver the best high quality product or service to my customer, maybe like I said, meet their expectation or exceed those expectations. They can assess in the project selection criteria. They can assist in validating the historical information to be used in calculating the cost or the duration for the different activities within a project. In addition, we can use the expert judgment to identify key assumptions, constraints, even risk analysis, and during the risk analysis phase or process, they can assist in that since they have the experience or they worked before in that area. Who can be qualified as an expert judge? Anyone that has a knowledge in the area that's relevant to the product or the service that will be provided at the end of the project. The expert judge can be from the organization itself, insider, can be outsider as a consultant. We can use the customers as experts, or we can assign subject matter experts from professional organization such as the IEEE organization, or any other maybe institution, let's say university or college, any professional institution that can provide the expert for us in such an area. Or we can go to a company, industry group that are specialized in this area, and they can give us some advice or assign someone that's expert to assist or help in the judgment for such a project. The project initiation process can be divided into 5 different activities. The first activity is to conduct project selection methods to evaluate the feasibility of the new product or service that will be provided at the end of the project. The second will be to identify the key stakeholders and perform analysis to gain the buy-in and requirements for success of the project. And then define the scope of the project based on the organization needs to meet the customer project expectations. The fourth activity will be to develop the project charter and review it with key stakeholders to confirm that this is what we are going to deliver at the end of the project. Those are the risks, those are the issues, and we are assuming that this will be available or this will not be available. We can add boundaries and constraints, so everybody will be on board of what's going to be delivered at the end of the project. And the fifth activity will be to identify and document the high-level risk assumptions and constraints using the historical data, the expert judgment, and the verification that we did with the stakeholder. So let's start with the first activity, the project selection. The project selection is a process for deciding projects to sponsor and for ensuring that projects are supportive of the organization's strategic objectives. If you look within any organization, there are lots of projects that can be initiated or that can be suggested and sponsored. But we have to select which one to start with or which one we are going to spend money on, and we should concentrate on the projects that support the organization's strategic objectives. Some senior management or in some organization, they have like a committee, management committee, or a program management office that perform the evaluation and selection process for the different projects that they would like to support and sponsor. The project selection method is any systematic approaches used to analyze the value of a proposed project. The evaluation may be formal or informal. Some of the organizations will have, like we said, a committee or a project management office. Then different personnel will come and present their projects, different projects, maybe through presentation, maybe through proposals, and then the committee will analyze it, look at the value for the company, prioritize the different projects, and select the project that has the most value and related to the strategic values of the company. Usually we have certain selection methods that are used, which are techniques used to execute the process, and they are organized into two major categories. So to look at the different projects and judge if it's a go or no go, I have to have some or certain measures to do that. The measures are under two main categories. One is benefit measure methods, and the other is constrained optimization methods. The method or the selection of a method used by an organization should be relevant to the objectives of the company, and it should be consistent with the capabilities and resources of the organization. If you have these capabilities, then you use method A. If you don't have these capabilities, you use method B, and so on. The feasibility analysis may be conducted using a formal study or informal brainstorming session, either through formal meetings or maybe through conference calls or normal calls or email messages. You brainstorm and you can conduct a feasibility analysis. It may be also used to compare alternative solutions to select the one that's the best fit for the organization. The cost-benefit analysis compares the predicted cost and benefits of a project. The two methods of project selection, like we said, is the benefit measurements or measurement and the constrained optimization. The benefit measurement is a comparative approach that compare the different projects that are proposed, and then select the one that has the most value or benefit for the organization, for the stakeholders, while the constrained optimization has a mathematical approach. So it has a formula, it has a value, mathematics. They start calculating, and then based on the outcome of the calculation, they will decide which project to go with. Usually this is used with very high complex projects, while the benefit measurements, which is the most common used, is used in many or more project selection than the constrained optimization. So the types of project selection method, like we said, the benefit measurement and the constrained optimization. Examples for the benefit measurement, like scoring models, cost benefit analysis, review board, economic models. While for the constraint optimization, examples are linear programming, non-linear programming, integer programming, dynamic programming, multi-objective programming. As you can see, it's very complex. It has mathematical models, and based on these mathematical models, we can run them and choose the proper project. The most common used is the benefit measurement approach. The benefit measurement model, it has cost benefit analysis, which provide the stakeholders with a net gain. We have another method, which is the weighted scoring model. Each project is evaluated based on a set criterion. The economical model, which looks at the cash flow analysis, takes into account the payback period, time value money, which uses net present value and internal rate of return, and generally the one with a higher net present value will be the better project or the project to choose. For the constraint optimization, it's a mathematical model that are used for extremely complex projects, and this techniques is not often used. Like I said, few organizations use that to judge their projects, and they would like to use just the cost benefit. How much would I benefit from that cost? And usually they look at the economical models and the time value money calculations. The second process, or the second activity in the initiation process, is to identify key stakeholders. In the analysis of the stakeholders, we would like to ask some questions on what, why, when, who, and how much. What's the stakeholder analysis? Why do stakeholder analysis? Why to do that? And when should it be done? Who should do the analysis? And how much time should we spend on stakeholder analysis? So these questions, why to do stakeholder analysis, is to understand who are the people involved in the project, and why to do that, because we need to know how to satisfy each part of the stakeholder within the project framework, and to deliver the proper outcome for each involved person as a stakeholder or organization or unit. When should it be done? It should be done in the initiation, during the initiation process, and after selecting the method or selecting the project. Once I identify the feasibility of the project and select the proper project, I should start analyzing the stakeholders who will be involved in that project, and based on that I will decide what are the objectives or the goals that need to be delivered for each stakeholder. Who should do the analysis? The project team. And how much time should be spent on stakeholder analysis? There should be, it depends on the project, the size of the project, but it's one of the most important thing in the initiation process, or one of the most important activities in the initiation process, because you will be able to understand the people involved in the project and their needs and their wants. Excuse me. The steps of doing stakeholder analysis. First of all, we need to develop a stakeholder table, then assessment for each stakeholder importance to project success and their relative power or influence. Then identify risk and assumptions which will affect project design and success. The stakeholder table actually identify and list all potential stakeholders. And if you look, if you think who are the stakeholders in a project, you will see that customers, users can be a stakeholder, the sponsor, the portfolio manager, program manager, and project manager, or project management office. Now remember that the portfolio manager, program manager, and project management office, that will be in a large organization that has multiple projects within a certain program, and programs and projects within a portfolio. In case you are dealing with smaller companies, then you can see that those stakeholders will be eliminated from the project. You have also the project team is considered as one of the stakeholders. The functional manager is considered one of the stakeholders, operations management, and then the seller or business partner, which is the supplier of the material if you are involving some material within the project. Once we develop the table for the stakeholders, we should identify their interest or relation to the project objectives. Note that the stakeholders may have similar interests, and most of these interests might even be conflicting, and we have to try to compromise or see how it can be integrated together to achieve project goals. So we need to briefly assess the likely impact of the project on each of these interests. Is it going to be positive, is it going to be negative, or unknown? Then we need to indicate the relative priority which the project should give to each stakeholder in meeting their interest. This refers to the priorities or the priorities derived from the different policies and project objectives. During listing or in the table, we are going to categorize the stakeholders. The starting point will be to divide the list into primary and secondary stakeholders. For the primary stakeholders are those people and groups ultimately affected by the project. The secondary stakeholders are the intermediaries in the process of delivering services to primary stakeholders. Then we identify potential supporters and opponents of the project. So what are the stakeholder expectations of the project? This should be documented to know exactly the expectation of each involved personnel or organization or unit, and also we need to identify the benefits that are likely to be for that stakeholder. Also we need to document the resources that the stakeholder wish to commit to that project, or maybe to avoid committing to the project. Then we need to identify other interests that the stakeholder have which may conflict with the project, and how does the stakeholder regard others in the list. One of the things that we need to look at also is the influence and importance of the stakeholders. It can be also added to the table to document the influence or the power of the stakeholder over the project. Does it control the decisions? Does it facilitate the implementation, or does it influence the project negatively? Also, that will include documenting which people can influence other stakeholders in making decision, convince them or persuade them into making a decision in certain area or course of action. To make sure that we covered everything when assessing stakeholders' importance, we will develop like a checklist, and the checklist will make sure that we did not miss anything during the assessment. So the first one in the checklist: which problems affecting which stakeholder does the project seek to address or elevate? The second will be which stakeholder does the project place priority on meeting their needs, interest, and expectation? And the third is which stakeholder interests converge most closely with policy and project objectives. So we have this checklist, we go through it and make sure that we did address this in the table. And again, like I said, if we have a table that can list the different stakeholders, their influence on the project, and their objectives, what do they expect by the end of the project, and then we will have the influence, the relationship between the different stakeholders, the priority and other criteria. Then we will be able to create the proper list and address it properly in execution, in the execution or during the execution stage of the project. And then, of course, we identify the assumptions and risks about stakeholders that's related to stakeholders, because we have other assumptions and risks that we need to assess or to document that is related to the project. So for this one, we need to identify the success of the project, the success criteria, the assumption that is related to the stakeholders, and the risk facing the project because of the conflict between the stakeholders, or the relation or the influence of the stakeholder. What is the role or response of a key stakeholder that must be assumed if the project to be successful? We need to know what to expect from each stakeholder. And then the negative responses which can be expected given the interest of the stakeholder, and if such responses occur, what impact could have on the project, what will be our response to mitigate that effect and keep the project going in the right direction to accomplish the project goals. Like I said, you can add also to the table the role or the participation that the stakeholder would like to share or participate within the project, and at what stage. And that will enhance actually the project or the stakeholder participation in the project when you clarify the roles of each one of them, and they will be on a knowledge of the relation, the role, and the expectation that they will receive at the end of the project. This will be a table that will identify the type of participation of the stakeholders, and you can add this table to the list table, or you can leave it separately, where you can use this for communication purposes. If you look at the different stages of the cycle within the identification, the planning, the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. You can look at the different roles of the stakeholders, and you know that those people you have to inform, those people you have to consult with, those people you have to partnership, and those people you have to control and make sure that they are doing their work. So those are the type of information that you would like to get when you analyze the stakeholder analysis or perform stakeholder analysis. From the findings of the stakeholder, we record all that or document it in a matrix. The risk assumption arising from the analysis will be also documented. The participation matrix will be developed, and the findings of stakeholder analysis will be included into the project concept note and the project document. It will be, also be appropriate to include analysis in annual or quarter monitoring report and reviews. The main purpose of the the project concept note, is to document the stakeholder analysis and the findings that we, the information that we discovered during the analysis that is important for the project execution and outcome. The analysis will be properly revised as the project design develops, interests change, and more information become available. And the main findings of stakeholder analysis can be presented in a table adapted from the original listing that we developed during the analysis. The project documents will need more details than the concept note, drawings on both the stakeholder analysis and any revisions arising out of appraisal. Examples of findings of stakeholder analysis: we can find the organizational culture, style, influence, how projects are performed, the organizational structure and their influence on how projects are performed, such as, being a functional organization, projectized organization, and so on. The organization's degree of project management maturity and its project management system, which can influence the project. The organizational process assets that can influence the success of project, such as lesson learned, historical information, resources, their ability of estimating the time, the cost, and so on. So all these are assets that will be within the organization and will be documented or can be found when we do stakeholder analysis. Also, we can document the organizational process and procedures. We have standard policies, standardized guidelines, work instructions, proposal evaluation criteria, and performance measurement criteria, templates, guidelines, and criteria for tailoring the organization's set of standard processes, organization communication requirements, project closure guidelines or requirements. In addition to financial control procedures, issue and defect management procedures, change control procedures, risk control procedure, procedures for prioritizing approving and issuing work authorizations. I will stop at this slide and we'll continue the second part. This will be the first part for chapter 2, and there will be a second session for chapter 2 as part 2. That will be all for this one. If you have any questions, you can email it to me and I will be more than glad to assist. Thank you.